Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to the latest in our series of ENO Center for Transportation webinars. My name is Robert Puentes. I am the president and CEO of ENO. And let me first extend my best wishes to you and yours and hope you are all safe and happy and healthy. Today, we present a rapid response webinar focused on the transportation elements of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I am joined virtually by Jeff Davis, senior fellow with ENO and the editor of ENO Transportation Weekly. As you probably know, Transportation Weekly has been the go-to source of information, analysis, and perspectives on all things transportation for at least the last 20 years. Literally, nobody follows all of this better than Jeff Davis does. Over the course of the next half hour or so, Jeff will present an overview of the massive bipartisan infrastructure bill, which includes the full surface transportation reauthorization and a $180 billion supplemental appropriation for the United States Department of Transportation. Jeff is going to explain how all this is organized and prioritized, and after that, we are going to take questions. So please use the questions function on the webinar website to submit. You don't have to wait until Jeff is done to submit questions. We'll take and look at those throughout his presentation. So again, thank you all very much for joining us today. And with that, let me turn it over to Jeff Davis.
Thank you very much, Rob. We have a bill at about 9 o'clock last night, after 72 hours of constant waiting around. The 2,702-page bipartisan legislative text is finally unveiled, offered on the floor. They're debating it in the Senate right now, kind of leisurely. And Mr. Schumer, the majority leader, believes that they can hopefully pass it by the end of this week. Slide, please. There we are. Like I said, deal is at hand between the bipartisan group and President Biden. Amendments are possible. There's one pending right now that Mr. Carper, the floor manager, offered, sort of a technical one on the water title. A few others, but as long as a solid core of bipartisan members backed by the majority leader don't want to amend this text too much, you're not going to see too many successful amendments to it. And then once it passes, it goes over to the House, which is technically in recess until September the 20th. But they may return mid-August to vote on the budget if the Senate passes the budget next week. And we'll get to the question at the end, which is how long after that can the Speaker keep this bill bottled up? But for the time being, let's go to the deal itself. Slide, please. This is a very strange and frustrating process to watch from outside, and I'm told reliably to work on the inside as well. This started with President Biden's American Jobs Plan, or the infrastructure parts of that plan, at least from March, I think, February, March, which was organized not necessarily by agency or committee. Normally, when an administration makes a proposal, it's been created by the cabinet departments and agencies and coordinated by the Office of Management and Budget, which has got a lot of experience in refereeing those and filling in the gaps, or it's proposed by Congress and largely comes out of their committee jurisdiction, which is subject-based, and everyone there is anxious to grab jurisdiction all the time, so they're always making sure that they can, take advantage of things, and so stuff really doesn't fall through the cracks there either. But it was organized, like Mr. Biden had areas in his plan like improve resiliency across all modes, that across at least a dozen different department and agency lines, or across, improve safety across many modes. I went to 3 or 4 different agencies, etc. So it's very strange way for him to organize it, but it was right off the campaign trail. I get it. But then once the bipartisan group picked up on this and started negotiating, they kept that basic structure. They combined the accelerate transformative projects with upgrade roads and bridges buckets into one. But other than that, they kept that subject matter divide, and then they appointed little working groups of bipartisan senators, not necessarily subject matter experts on each one. The subject matter expert legislators and their staff were largely left out. Apparently, the bipartisan group would come up with the way they wanted some numbers to work from a particular program, and take the numbers to the committee staff, and the committee staff would have to try to work out a language that would create a program or massage a program in a way that would produce that numerical outcome. It's a strange way to do it. We're very fortunate that there were several off-the-shelf bills. The Public Works Committee's highway reauthorization and the Commerce Committee's railroad, hazmat, and safety reauthorization that were unanimous or near unanimous come out of committee, and therefore the bipartisan group could take those off the shelf and ready to go and include those and incorporate those to be the bulk of the pages, between the EPW and the other service bill, the water bill that was passed by the Senate a few months ago. There was a lot of bipartisan work product that was out there that was ready to be folded into this. Next slide, please. So you keep hearing that top line of $550 billion in additional spending. So I've gone through myself and tried to unbucket that and take it out of the format it was announced in and put it into departmental lines. And I figured out that the U.S. Department of Transportation gets almost 50% of that $550 billion in additional spending. $274 billion for DOT, 25 for the Corps of Engineers and Bureau of Reclamation water stuff, 61 for the EPA. That's mostly also water, clean drinking water, safe water projects, lead in the drinking water, and Superfund. 20 billion for Interior, which is mostly again water or also public land stuff. Energy 62, and then other 108. I think there's some Commerce Department in there and some other things. But I haven't. This is a transportation newsletter. It's not all public policy. I don't have the time to go chasing down everything. But so the key here is that of the 500 billion in additional spending, 274 is DOT. The big question is, in addition to what? Slide, please. It's addition to what they call baseline, and baseline is supposed to be whatever the federal government was already spending. Now, for programs that are reliant on annual appropriations that can go up and down, baseline is a very fluid thing, and no one pays much attention to it. But for highway trust fund programs, like the ones that expire on September 30th, that those actually have a very specific flatline baseline legally that you're supposed to use. So it's pretty simple. However much money it got that last year that it was authorized, multiply that times the number of years you're looking at, that's your baseline. So 47.101 billion, no, it's highway only. 58.709, it was the total highway transit and safety contract authority last year fast, and times 5, that's 293.5. So for those programs, that is the baseline. So that's in addition to the 293.5 for highway trust fund reauthorization service transportation. So slide, please. US DOT gets $567 billion out of this thing. So you start off, like I said, with that 293.5 of flatline highway trust fund contract authority. Then the you see on the right there, I got the 274 increase for DOT. That's broken up into two parts. They used 89.8 billion of the 274 to increase highway trust fund contract authority above that flatline baseline, so that they could fund the bill that had come out of the EPW committee already and the bill that had come out of the Commerce committee already. And then they found the Federal Transit Administration money to fit in there also. So 89.8 billion of the 274 increase above baseline was to beef up contract authority, and the other 184.1 billion was for what Rob mentioned, this massive supplemental appropriations bill in Division J of the package, where that the appropriations committees just made, I don't know how much it is total, 184 billion for DOT of what they call advance appropriations. So if this thing were signed into law tomorrow, those appropriations would go on the books in fiscal year 2021, because we're not to September 30th yet. But because they're advance appropriations, they say that they'll be released and made available for obligation over a 5-year period. October 1st, 2021, fiscal 2022, and then the following 4 years, they pop up on October 1st to become available and are available for that fiscal year, or whatever the extension in the paragraph is. So US DOT total 567.5. Sorry, 567.4. That includes surface transportation and a lot of money, other general fund money, but all that's provided by the bill itself. That does not include authorizations for what the Appropriations Committee might or might not give you next year, year after that, which are a key part of mass transit funding, and which used to be, until right now, the entirety of Federal Railroad Administration funding. Slide, please. Now that trust fund spending, that 293 and the extra money, that is made possible by the fact that we got another $118 billion of bailout of the highway trust fund by the general fund in the back of the bill in the finance committee title. $90 billion for the highway account and 28 for the mass transit account. And as you can see here, that takes the total bailouts by the general fund of the highway trust fund since September 2008 to $271.8 billion net. Some sequester took a haircut off of one of them one year, but for the most part, they've been exempt from sequester, and it's 271.8 are the total bailouts to date. Slide, please. Now, here is a way of visualizing that the distribution of that $567.4 billion provided by the bill that will probably make transit people angry. You can see that, and that several agencies have both contract authority and those general fund appropriations at the back. Federal Highway Administration, just north of 351 total, combining their 304 of contract authority and 48, I think, or whatever, 47 of general fund. And then the Federal Transit Administration had, I believe, $59 billion $69 billion of contract authority, and then 21.25 of general fund. Federal Rail Administration had 66, all of general fund, and then the FAA had 25 general fund. I forget the Office of Secretary. Safety modes, which are NHTSA, NFMC, and PHMSA, and then Maritime Administration had about 2.3 billion. So that's the relative distribution. You can see that because their baseline was higher than anybody else's, Federal Highway Administration got way more money than anybody else. Next slide, please. Highway funding. You can see here that they had they got 68.5 of increase above their baseline on contract authority to a total of 304, and then $47.25 billion for those one-time general fund appropriations, which largely went to because the president in his bucket that said roads and bridges, he proposed like 110, 115. They got 93 if you want to look at it that way. But the president had proposed $50 billion for reorganizing the program to a new fix it first or something like that, steady good repair program, which he didn't get. But his second priority was $40 billion to upgrade bridges, and he did get that, every dime of it. The underlying bill had put $3.625 billion of highway contract authority towards a new discretionary program for really big bridges, and the general fund appropriation brought that up to, I think, 12.5, and that program was based on the New Starts program. Actually, the big bridges they'd be evaluated and rated, and then they would sign multi-year letters of intent. We're talking like $1 billion bridge replacements, and the Biden administration, actually in their AJP, had said they were going to try to replace the 10 biggest, most economically significant bridges that need replacement. And so that $12.5 billion program would seem to be the discretionary, would seem to be that. And then they also created a $27.5 billion formula bridge program entirely in the appropriations of the general fund in the back. That's, I think, giving out 75% in your state's ratio of that's total cost to replace poor condition bridges, and 25% in your state's ratio to fix fair condition bridges. Now, because that money goes out by formula, you group it together with all the other highway formula money that was given out based on the stupid old gas tax centric formula that Texas runs. And the problem with that is that some states, because they've been good stewards and because they just don't have that many bridges, don't really have a lot of costly bridges that in poor condition need to be replaced or fair condition have been rehabbed. Because of that, it turns out when you put an extra $27.5 billion of formula money on top based on bridge needs, it's not good for Florida and Georgia, basically. So the final formula in the Senate bill, if you include the bridge money, doesn't look as good for the Senate bill as it does for all the other states. So we got $351.25 billion for the Federal Highway Administration provided directly by the bill. That $115.75 billion increase is 49% increase over the flatline baseline for money provided. So, highways got 49% more than they were getting in the last year of the FAST Act moved forward. Slide, please. Mass transit funding, people complain about the number. They got 19.15 in extra highway trust fund contract authority. They got 21.25 of general fund advance appropriations. And then depending on how you count their baseline for general fund appropriations, they got a little more on top of that. The new general fund appropriation levels are $3 billion a year for capital investment grants, and then $150 million a year for WMATA. They reauthorized the WMATA subsidy that had expired, and they increased the authorization level, the target for new starts from 2.4 to 3 a year, subject to the will of the appropriators later on. They take FTA administrative expenses, which had been annual general fund appropriations, and put them in with the trust fund, locking them up for 5 years. I'm not sure why. But basically, the one-time general fund advance is $8 billion for capital investment grants, new subways, new light rail, new BRTs, in addition to up to $3 billion that will be appropriated each year from the general fund, hopefully. That's going to pay for a lot of new starts, a lot of core capacity project upgrades, and a lot of small starts. Also, I believe there's they beef up the discretionary low-no bus grant program by $5.25 billion, and the state of good repair formula program by $4.75 billion, and the elderly disabled formula by $250 million. That's all on top of the amount that comes out of the highway trust fund. And then they also that big they also put a program, but Tammy Duckworth had a bill called the ASAP Act. It was about ADA upgrades for wheelchair people, for wheelchair users, to legacy fixed guideway assets, subway stations and light rail stations, and that got $1.75 billion. And then they put $1.25 in there for ferry boat service in rural communities, and $250 million for low emission or electric ferry boats. So because passenger ferries, they're not boats, they're mass transit, and the ferries that your car drives on are not boats, they're highways. That's apparently the rule. But as much as they didn't like the number, their $42 billion increase was 65% higher than their flatline baseline. So they got a significantly higher percentage boost, 65 versus 49%, than did highways. Slide, please. Then you got rail funding. And like I said, the baseline doesn't really matter because it's all everything the appropriators want to spend every year. But administration asked for 80 billion and they got 66. The president's top priority was the Northeast Corridor. He asked for, I think, 36 and he got 60. So he got 30. The Amtrak National Network is always the top priority of the Senate, just why the Amtrak National Network still exists, bipartisan love. They got the same 16 billion the president asked for. CRISI grants that are a lot of safety grants to various kinds of railroads got the same $5 billion, the exact amount the president asked for. The Senate added $3 billion for a new grade crossing safety program. And then what was left of the 66 was $12 billion for new and upgraded intercity service that's not Amtrak National Network or Amtrak Northeast Corridor. And that's equivalent to, we only got $3 billion, I think, for FRA last year. So that's 11 times last year's budget, and that $3 billion was unusually high. It's gone up the last couple of 3 years. So I looked on the public budget database this morning, and that 66 billion is a little bit more than every dollar appropriated to FRA for 18 years, last 18 years, 2004 through 2021. That includes the era stimulus, the COVID money, all that. That is a tremendous, tremendous amount of money for passenger rail and freight rail. Now, the bill also in the underlying Commerce Committee part reauthorizes and for future appropriations from the appropriations committees. They still want Amtrak Northeast Corridor to get, I think, average of 1.3 billion a year, 2.5 for the national network a year. $1 billion a year for CRISI grants, and you know, like $1.5 billion a year for the federal-state partnership for the new capacity. But given how much money is up front, I'm not sure how hard the appropriations committees are going to, you know, dig under couch cushions and find other subcommittees to pay off to fulfill some of these authorizations when so much appropriated money has gone out already for these programs. Slide, please. For airports, it was pretty simple. The president asked for $25 billion and got 25. FAA facilities and equipment account to upgrade air traffic control facilities, and in some cases even move control towers. It's $5 billion. They put $15 billion to beef up the airport improvement program, which goes for airside development, runways, taxiways, lighting, aprons, things like that, and airside safety. $15 billion via formula. And then $5 billion for a new discretionary grant program for ground side, terminal development and intermodal connections, terminal, you know, connecting to ground transportation, things like that, for a total of 25. They changed the airside versus ground side ratio in the final bill from what the president asked for a little bit, but not that big. You know, that's he got basically all he wanted. Slide, please. And then just look at this. This is how much of the appropriations, none of the underlying contract authority, goes for grant programs, most of the state and local governments, and how much of it just from the appropriations. Pete Buttigieg is going to have over $100 billion from this bill to give away via competitive grant programs. It's just astonishing. And another $53.7 billion for formula-based grant programs. I'm not counting things like the grants for Amtrak or the FAA facilities and equipment, because that's, you know, those aren't really grants outside government. But you can see here, you know, they created a new mega projects program and gave it $5 billion. They beef up the RAISE grant program by $7.5 billion upfront in addition to whatever the appropriator is going to do every year. There's a new safe street grants for discretionary grants for communities to plan for and then adopt Vision Zero policies and projects. There's $1 billion for culvert replacement so fish can get under highways better. There's those other airport grants we're talking about, the bridge grants. There's a $5 billion EV charging infrastructure formula. They beef up the infra grants at federal highways with an extra $3.2 billion from the general fund. There's grant money for reducing truck emissions in ports, $500 to double up the reconnecting communities. And then those rail grants, the ADA upgrades are discretionary, the ferry money is discretionary. They give $2.25 billion to this port infrastructure development grant program at Maritime Administration that's been cooking along at $200 to $300 million a year for 3 years. So that's, you know, eight times or so an annual budget all at once. And then $1 billion for this new grants to communities who want to upgrade their natural gas pipeline distribution through PIMSA. So just, it's going to take a lot of extra staff power and organization to get a lot of these grants out at the department. They also changed the organization. They created an assistant secretary for multimodal and freight transportation to be confirmed by the Senate, and created an office of multimodal and freight in the office of the secretary, and specifically put that in charge of the infra grants and RAISE grants, mega projects, and culvert program, the SMART grants, and 2 or 3 other things that are that they didn't feel like the agencies, that the individual local administrations had the best way to distribute. So, but that's what Secretary Pete's going to have to look forward to for the next few years, is annual deadlines, because there's a lot of deadlines built into this. They say, okay, once the money becomes available on October 1st, you got to put this solicitation out there within, I don't know, 3-6 months, and then you got to, you know, keep evaluating those projects and rating. So there's going to be a big pivot towards DOT being even more of a grant-based making organization than it was. And remember that in 2012, MAP 21 basically got rid of almost all of the competitive grant programs for highways and transit and rail that existed at the time, because Congress had gotten rid of earmarks in 2011 and said, if we can't pick our projects, the administration shouldn't be able to. And they brought some back in 2015, but now they're back like gangbusters. Slide, please. So what's next? Like I said, the Senate is likely to pass the bill by the end of this week. The House officially went out of session Friday night until September 20th. But if the Senate winds up being able to pass a budget resolution next week with 50 votes, the House probably come take it up, because that resolution will trigger a lot of things that take some time, and you don't want to wait until September 20th to start the process of telling the committees to write a reconciliation bill. Also, if they do wind up using this process to deal with debt limit, you want to do that now rather than wait till September 20th to start, because we're going to run out of debt limits headspace, sometime in October, I think. Then the question becomes, how long will Speaker Pelosi be able to hold off dozens of moderate Democrats who really want to vote for this deal? They want the infrastructure dollars. They want the bipartisan nature of it. And the fact that President Biden has taken steps to prove that he's got political ownership of this thing. He doesn't just say it's the bipartisan deal. It says it's President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure deal. It belongs to him. Secretary Buttigieg is out there selling it left and right as the administration's deal about how great it is. So as much as Chairman Defazio in the House is understandably irate that he spent all this time putting together a much more progressive work product that passed the House with a party line vote that the Senate has just completely ignored, everyone feels it coming. It's happened on a lot of other kinds of legislation in the past, where that you feel that the Senate is just going to jam the House and force the House to take whatever it did and say, this is it, all or nothing. And the Senate has been able to do that in the past without pressure from the White House. With pressure from the White House, who knows how this is going to end up. The Speaker has sworn not to bring up the bill in the infrastructure bill in the House until after we at least get some more clarity on whether or not there's going to be a reconciliation bill. But I've still never been completely convinced they're going to have the votes to start the budget process in the House, much less get to a reconciliation bill and finish it. You only got to lose 3 or 4, and there's a lot of different moving pieces that people are going to be hesitant to endorse on this thing once it sees the light of day. So the longer that a Senate passed transportation bill sits around in the House, you start to think of what happens when we get closer to September 30th, when the Highway Trust Fund expires and the states run out of new highway money, and transit agencies run out of new contract authority, and everyone at FHWA gets furloughed. So that's the issue. So we'll start looking for in September, if this lasts that long, whether or not the Highway Trust Fund programs will be extended in a continuing resolution, if one of those even can get passed. Because again, debt limit happening at this time, it's always possible that gets wrapped into it too. A lot of fiscal crises things have approximately the same deadline within a few weeks of each other, and it's going to be really interesting in the late September. But that is right at about 28 minutes for my meandering presentation. Forgive me, I only had like an hour and a half of sleep last night, and I would be glad to take questions through our moderator.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jeff. So folks can clearly see that there's an awful lot in here, and Jeff said hadn't really slept. So there's a lot of questions have come in, a lot of very specific. We'll see how much Jeff can deal with some of those. But as he said, there's still an awful lot that he and we still need to wade through here. There's an awful lot baked in here. So let me start with some questions. I'm going to try to keep it broad and some of the bigger questions, and then kind of funnel it down to things that are very specific. Lots of questions about specific modes and specific programs, things like that. But a couple of folks have asked, and if you just can do this real quick, Jeff, can you explain the difference between contract authority and general appropriation funds? We talked about that a couple times in the middle. Just a little refresher for folks.
Contract authority is a kind of spending authority that does not come from the appropriations committees. It comes from an authorizing committee, and it lets you sign a contract and put Uncle Sam on the hook legally for an appropriation before the appropriation actually gets made. So it was a type of what's called backdoor spending that emerged in 1923 in a highway conference, actually, trying to find a way to do power sharing between the appropriations committee and the committee that was doing highways at the time. So it's real money, just as appropriation is real money, but it doesn't come from the appropriations committees, so they've always been a bit resentful of it. And then appropriations are made by the annual appropriations bills, or in this case, the back title of this bill. So, and contract authority these days has to become a trust fund account. So it's pretty much all highway trust fund or airport and airway trust fund these days.
And there's a good piece that Jeff wrote on it's on ENO's website. If you go to enotrans.org and search for that in the search bar, you should be able to pull that up pretty easily. And lots of questions here on the process. I think folks are really interested in how this all got done and how it plays out. And there's a bunch of questions around this one idea. So since revenue bills are required to originate in the House, this seems like it's originating in the Senate. How does all that shake out? Can you explain that, the process for folks?
Okay. The Senate is not currently debating. The bipartisan deal was not introduced in the Senate as a Senate bill. It was introduced in the Senate as an amendment to replace to the House passed bill HR 3684, which was the Invest in America Surface Transportation bill, which had a bunch of other infrastructure stuff added to it on the floor. The highway part of HR 3684 was not a revenue bill, but when they added that water stuff, the water provision had two different grant programs in it for water quality for poor households that specifically made the grants exempt from federal income tax. So that made it a revenue bill. And so the Senate is now free, per the Constitution, to add many more revenue provisions as amendments or an amendment to the bill. So right now, the bipartisan deal with a bunch of tax stuff is pending as a amendment to replace the text of the House bill. And if it passes the House, then the question will be, one, adopt the amendment, the bipartisan amendment to replace all the text of HR 3684, and then Senate passes HR 3684 as amended, sends it back to the House, which then has the choice. Do we just knuckle under and agree to the Senate amendment, in which case the bill goes to the White House, or they try to disagree to the amendment or amend the amendment or whatever, and that kind of thing. So there are many different parliamentary things the Speaker can choose from once the bill goes back to the House, with the originating chamber of the House, presumably later this week.
I'm glad you answered that way. I would have been able to stumble through that, but I'm glad I didn't have to do it. That was a great explanation. And a lot of folks want to know then, what do we think about a conference, Senate House conference?
That's normally the way these things go, but a conference with a honest difference splitting conference with the House would probably upend any number of delicate bipartisan agreements. Because remember, normally in a conference, Mr. Defazio, the House chairman, would go to conference and negotiate with his counterparts, the chairman of the committees that do highways and transit and safety in the Senate. That's the way these conferences normally work. This deal wasn't put together by Defazio's Senate counterparts. It was put together by Kirsten Sinema and Rob Portman and Joe Manchin and Mr. Cassidy in Louisiana and 6 or 7 other various members. Most of them are not on the committees of jurisdiction. So politically and technically, it's hard to have a conference committee when the real negotiators who were in charge of the deal wouldn't be allowed to be on the conference or members of the conference normally. So that's part of the problem. And because of the difficulty in striking this, and the fact that the senators struck this deal with Joe Biden, president, not with the House. So this isn't just a Senate bill. This is the Biden, Sinema, Portman, Tester, bill. Because of that, there's going to be a strong pressure put on, the senators, once this passes, were saying, hey, how should you just take this? It's a great deal. It's got more money than the House bill, actually, which is true. It covers a lot more modes, which is true. I haven't even gotten into the various modes that are in there, but it does. And sure, it's not as aggressive on policy as you'd like to be, but the money's right. And why don't you just take this much progress and be happy? And the Speaker won't want to do it. Mr. Defazio most definitely does not want to do it. He's been very explicit about that. But at the end of the day, if it's a strong possibility that they go to conference, the bill never comes out, or all the deals fall apart, and we get to an election year, and it would take time. So guaranteed progress in getting a bill done versus the possibility of this getting hung up for a long, long time. I don't know. We'll see.
That gets to one of the most popular questions that is in here about how annoyed is Mr. Defazio. I think you just answered that question. There's been a lot of reporting on that. So
you Google Defazio, and there've been 3 or 4 articles in Politico in the last 2 weeks that quote him at length. I can't do this on a family webinar, but we all know Mr. Defazio. He gets angry and speaks out, and he has been getting angry and speaking out on this topic. Yes,
for obvious reasons.
I can't blame him, because this is the second time this happened to him, because he and Oberstar wanted to do their bill in 2009, and then Obama came in at the last minute, sent Ray LaHood down there. I was in the room next door, the press were waiting for Defazio and Oberstar to come out and brief us on their bill, and the White House had sent Ray LaHood down there to tell them, no, do an 18-month extension to the next Congress. The president and DOT want this bill for the second 2 years of the first term, and they both screamed at Ray and came back and red-faced and briefed us anyway. But the speaker at that point backed the administration and wouldn't let Mr. Oberstar and Mr. Defazio move their bill. And then the Republicans took over Congress, and then that was it. They couldn't at that point. So the administration, of course, also knows. Everyone who's at the administration knows this. That may be actually why they're doing this. They're not at all sure that they will have control of Congress 2 years from now, so they figure strike the deal you want right now, immediately, rather than risk, running in the next year and getting delayed. So maybe that's part of why they're doing it. Who knows? Or more likely, it's because the world where a ragtag rebel bunch of moderates from both parties can build a coalition like this and win a great bipartisan legislative victory, that's the world Joe Biden wants to live in, personally. That's the world he grew up in the Senate when he came there as a young man in 1972, and that's the world he still wants to believe exists. And it was just this whole prospect was too enticing for him to stay away from on a personal basis.
Indeed. So then the other big question then related, what happens to all the earmarks that are in the Invest Act?
Oh boy. There were $5.6 billion of earmarks in Invest. There are no earmarks in the bipartisan Senate bill. They won't be added on the Florida amendment. Will pass the Senate without earmarks. Now, this happened 2 other times in the past, in 1998 and then in 2005. House passed bills that had earmarks in, reauthorization bills. Senate responded, amended those bills with bills that didn't have earmarks. And in the House Senate conference committees, magically, both House and Senate earmarks were included. In both cases, I think the House earmarks took like a 25 or 30% haircut reduction, and that money was then given to senators to earmark. But that's a lot harder to do if you don't have a conference committee. If you have to just, if this ends with the House being forced to just eat the Senate bill entirely and send it to the president, there won't be any earmarks. And if they wind up trying to do this via a ping pong of amendments, where the House would amend the Senate bill, amendment, send it back, see what they do, it's a little more difficult to add the earmarks that way. I think there would be, there's still enough stink on member designated projects from the bad old days of the 2000s that they probably wouldn't want to do it in as high a profile way, particularly if that's one of the few actual substantive things they were doing. So going to a conference, it would be much more likely that the earmarks will survive in this legislation if it goes to conference than if it is settled some way other than a formal conference.
Thank you. So one question is very specific that I thought was a great question here, given the scope of all this. So how much of this is going, how much support is going for administrative accounts and FTEs to increase at the agencies? You mentioned that there's going to be an awful lot of work at the departments in order to deal with all these discretionary grants. Does anything in here account for that? Or is this just something they're going to have to deal with on their own?
let's see. At federal highways, admin goes up under this bill from, where was it? It goes up from 481 to 534 over 6 years. And then at FTA, it goes up from, the last year was 131 up to like 151. So there's so to 247. So there's some growth, but more importantly, in a lot of these grant programs, they say the secretary may reserve a 0.5% or a 0.75% of the total value of the annual appropriation of the grant for administrative overhead, and they can use that money to hire people as well. So there's to that extent, to the extent there are oversight set-asides contained in these grant programs, some of the manpower issues scale up. If the availability of resources to deal with those would scale up with the size of the grant programs. But they may still need some kind of supplemental. Some agencies may still need some kind of supplemental appropriations or boosts in their regular budget in the next appropriations bill to deal with grant programs of this size if they wind up getting enacted.
You've talked about this a lot over the last 12 hours. Just how different is then all this discretionary money going to the, what should folks think about that? Just how different is all of it?
I believe that, first of all, it's, we've acknowledged that the states are generally going to tell you that the smaller the size of the grants, the better, the more efficiently it would be handled if you distribute the money by formula to the states and let them deal with it rather than do it at USDOT. But there are, so to the extent there are grant programs for mega projects, for billion-dollar bridges, and for billion-dollar new subway light rail extensions and things like that, those make sense as discretionary programs. Also, I think that part of it, because we know that the bill doesn't have as much climate change policy built into it as the House bill did, because it's a evolutionary, not revolutionary, unanimous bill. But the fact that President Biden and Secretary Buttigieg believe in those principles so strongly, they probably feel that by switching more of the money from formulas where states pick projects or states pick projects to discretionary where USDOT picks projects, that the secretary can keep a sort of thumb on the scale in favor of some of these values. I mean, obviously, the laws in each case set specific rules that the secretary has to follow, but even within those rules and laws, there's a good deal of interpretation, and Democrats feel that having the secretary's thumb on the scale will help those causes.
All right, we have a couple more minutes. Let me just ask about some specific modes. A lot of folks are wondering about high-speed rail. You talked about rail in here, but high-speed rail is not mentioned at all, I don't believe.
Well, you can get higher speed rail with that 30 billion in the Northeast corridor, depending on how they spend it. So you'll be able to, which is still the only place that you have some of those top, Acela speeds. It's to have the Acelas capable of going 160 miles an hour when you only have 8 or 10 or 20 miles of traffic. I forget the number, miles of track on the Northeast corridor that could actually is capable of letting the locomotives go that fast. It's never made sense. So that $30 billion should be able to buy you some significant speed upgrades in a lot of stretches of the Northeast corridor. Beyond that, and you can do some of that with the national network money to do what American style high speed rail of 110 miles an hour. It's not really high speed rail anywhere else in the world, by doing some switching upgrades and through bypasses and things like that. But as far as true global style high speed rail, the only place that's got that is that you have that $12 billion for the federal state partnership grants. And that's enough money to actually help out, a project like Brightline, depending if it's part of a much broader financing package. It conceivably, if they just want to put some of it towards California, if they ever have an end date, if they decide to just stick with the Merced to Bakersfield and finish that off, or a little bit maybe if they decide to go towards the valley, the Silicon Valley to Central Valley connection. But 12 billion, even if you put all 12 billion towards California, it's not enough to actually fix their problem. Their long-term funding, not even close. So $12 billion is a lot of money, but it's not nearly as much as high-speed rail fans wanted. They wanted, I think, 30 billion in the House bill. The Seth Moulton types who are really born again in high-speed rail. So it's enough money if you use it. If you want to put it all on high-speed rail and use it sparingly and use it wisely, break it up two or three, four ways, you can make a difference with a bunch of larger financing projects for true high-speed rail, but not all at once to take care of California.
Just about out. Two more very quick things to see. Do maybe some rapid fire answers. The MARAD money that's going for port investments. I guess this is a new program.
No, it's the same program that Mario Diaz-Balart basically created in the 2019 DOT appropriations bill when they had more money. They got a lot of money at the end of the year they didn't know what to do with. So he just put them up towards MARAD. And then while the bill was in conference, he got the Armed Services Committee to authorize it. It's actually an authorized port development program at MARAD, and they got between $200 and $300 million a year in the 2019, 20, and 21 appropriations bills, and then this will open up the floodgates. But so you can find the underlying statute, by either in the bill itself or in the 2019 appropriations bill.
And last thing, anything in here for MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations specifically?
I know that the Senate bill doesn't increase the percentage of Surface Transportation Development Block Grant that's suballocated by population. I can't think of what I saw. Again, so many MPOs are eligible recipients and applicants for many of these new grant programs, but aside from that, I can't remember seeing too much specific stuff on the planning side.
I think that's right. Well, it's like by far the most common question we got here, especially at the end, is thank you to Jeff. Just a lot of people really appreciative that you have gone through this and present all this information. It's obviously a ton of stuff that is not even 24 hours old yet. So, and my own personal thanks, Jeff, to you for foregoing sleep and for pulling all this together. It's certainly valuable to a lot of folks. And if folks didn't already know the value of Transportation Weekly and Jeff Davis, you certainly know it now. Jeff Davis and Transportation Weekly are invaluable resources for all things transportation, and there's so much more that's still going to have to come out from this bill. New analyses, new insights. So pay attention to our website, our social media, and all that kind of stuff. You'll see answers to a lot of these questions as we start to pull it together. I do want to be respectful to Jeff and his time because he does need to get to sleep. So we're going to have to stop it here. The slides will be available in the form of the recording of this, which will be up on our YouTube site. You should be able to find that pretty easily. And if you want more information about check out our website, www.enotrans.org. Again, my thanks very much to Jeff Davis.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Be well.